Okay, camera's gonna go on.
Exactly.
Are we 3
You don't
o'clock?
waste any time.
All right.
Okay.
Heiko, can you hear us? Or Amy?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Hello, Tanessa. How's things in Florida?
Good.
Very good. Grace accepted her scholarship and accepted the offer to attend the college. So it's exciting.
Oh, that's outstanding. Is it
Yeah.
snowing there?
It is not. No, it is not. Is it snowing there?
Yes.
Yes, it is. It's actually hailing at the moment.
Yeah, more like a hail.
Wow. Wow. Kind of bummed to miss it.
Okay, let's get started. It's February 23rd. It's the regular meeting of the Shasta Regional Transportation Authority, and it is 3 o'clock. We have returned to in-person meetings. If you'd like to participate in a certain meeting virtually, please do so. And do we have anybody out there that's wanting to do this remotely besides Tanessa?
We have several remote viewers. We have Mike Gallagher and Peter Wickenheiser from City of Anderson, Brenda Caruso from Caltrans.
Okay. Well, let's do a roll call, please. We're going to do roll call and then the pledge, or do you want me to do the pledge first?
Roll call first.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome on this snowy day. I'm glad everybody could make it safely. Let's start with a roll call. Board Member Audette,
Here.
Board Member Rickert, here. Board Member Mazzano,
Here.
Board Member Watkins,
Here.
Board Member Newts,
Here.
Board Member Garmin,
Here.
and Board Member Jones.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll stand for the pledge. Sean, I'd like to have you lead us in the pledge.
Be happy to. Ready? Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Sean, would you like to do staff introductions?
Yes, I'd be happy to do so, Vice Chair Mazzano. Here in the audience with us, I have Associate Transportation Planner Mehdi Modanandini, Kimi Taguchi, and then Senior Transportation Planner Jennifer Pollum. On the other end of the hallway here, we have Associate Transportation Planner Michael Cooker. We have Administrative Associate Amy Lindsay. Also, Senior Transportation Planner Keith Williams. Not with us today is CFO Jessica Carlson. She is at one of the California Academy Regional Leaders Leadership Workshops this week. So she is not here today. With that, I think that's all the introductions I have.
Thank you. Okay, as vice chair, we will go to item number 4. You need to elect a SRTA chair and vice chair.
Yep, I'll do a quick introduction on this one. Just every February, we nominate chair and vice chair for the board of directors once we have our appointments of those representatives for the SRTA board of directors. Historically, we've done it as a rotation basis because we have so few members that actually make up the region for representation. However, the board can choose whoever they want at their pleasure to sit as chair and vice chair. With that, I will hand it over to the board.
I would nominate vice chair to be chair.
And we have okay, did you hear that, Amy? Where'd she go?
Amy, are you there?
Repeat that?
We have Patrick Henry Jones endorsing me as the vice chair to be chair.
Okay,
And Greg Watkins seconded the motion.
Stan Newt did.
Oh, I'm sorry, Stan Nunes did. I'm sorry.
great, thank you.
I'll call for the vote. Can we do the chair and the vice chair at the same time, Sean?
You can do chair and vice chair at the same
Okay,
time.
so for vice chair, Patrick, you have a lot of experience. You've been around for a while, and are you interested? Would you accept?
Sure.
Then I would nominate Patrick Henry Jones for vice chair, and I need a second.
I'll second that.
Greg Watkins, Amy is second my
Okay.
motion. Now we'll call for the vote, please.
Okay, let's call the roll call. So we have Board Member Audette,
Yes.
Board Member Rickert,
Yes.
Board Member Mazzano,
Yes.
Board Member Watkins,
Yes.
Board Member Newts,
Yes.
Board Member Garmin,
Yes.
and Board Member Jones.
No, just kidding.
Great, thank you, everyone.
Okay, the vote carries. Moving on to item 5. Sean, you want to do the introduction?
I'll do the introduction on this one real quick. And congratulations on being chair as well now. Added yourself to a bunch of responsibility. On this item, one of the things we have as part of the board of directors is we have a subcommittee of the board. Usually this is made up of 3 board members. This fiscal and policy committee has a few high-level management purposes to advise both myself and the CFO on matters at the agency. This includes also initially meeting with our auditors, so doing pre and post-audit meetings for the auditors. That is one element where we will come to the board and you will decide who the auditors are after we've done a procurement and they're working on your behalf to audit the agency. So there's usually 1 or 2 meetings related to the audits. Additionally, you'll provide advice to myself and management on any agency policies or procedures that need updated or if there were new ones. Anything in terms of direction on staffing and human resource needs, as well as doing the initial annual review of myself as part of the executive director's review done each December. So with that, we usually meet at least twice a year, sometimes every meeting. Before every meeting, it depends on the needs of that year. And we ask for 3 members. Usually the chair is an automatic member of the Fiscal and Policy Committee and 2 primary members. And we also ask for 1 alternate. That way, in case one of the primaries cannot be here, we can ask the alternate to attend as well. With that, I'll hand that item over to the board for discussion and vote.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you, you normally have the chair, that would be me this year, serve on that committee. So that we need a nomination for that because I'm ready to nominate the 2 other people.
Yeah, so we prefer to have it where you still nominate who the chair plus who the other 2 members would be.
So then I need a motion, folks, to have a chair and then,
I'll nominate Mazzano for chair.
okay. And then I want to nominate Tanessa Audet and Greg Watkins.
I would rather be the alternate
Okay.
because
My
the mayor
first
this
alternate
year.
was Mike Gallagher. So Mike,
Mike Gallagher volunteers to do
he
it.
volunteers because he's not here, so he does volunteer.
We'll actually have one.
He's voluntold.
Yeah. Are you
I'd be
online,
happy.
Michael?
I'd be happy to.
Okay, thank you, Tanessa. Michael, are you online?
I thought he was.
He volunteered.
Well,
Mike
Stan, I
Gallagher
think
is
you touched it,
online,
right?
but he is attending. He's not a panelist. I can promote him to panelist.
He can't,
We can't.
no, because Stan is here as the primary.
I got you.
No, he volunteered.
He volunteered. Okay. So we have a motion and
And I'll second it.
we have a second from Barry. Tim Garmin made the original motion. I made the second motion for the alternates and the other members, and now it's being confirmed by Mary Rickard.
So am I seconding both motions or just is all one motion?
Well-
There's 2 motions.
There's 4 people on there.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm seconding both motions.
Right.
Okay, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, it's called for the vote.
Great. Board Member Audette,
Yes.
Board Member Rickert,
Yes.
Board Member Mazzano,
Yes.
Board Member Watkins,
Yes.
Board Member Newts,
Yes.
Board Member Garmin,
Yes.
and Board Member Jones.
Okay, motion carries. Mazzano's the chair, and then Tanessa Audet is the second, and the third will be Mike Gallagher, and Mr. Watkins is the alternate. You got that, Amy?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Item number 7, public comment period.
Item number
I'm
6.
sorry, correction. Item number 6, you're on again, Sean.
Yep. On this item, what we have as a regional agency, one of the organizations we're a part of is the California Association of Councils of Governments. This is a statewide organization that represents metropolitan planning organizations, regional transportation planning agencies, councils of governments, and local transportation commissions. They're a conduit for us to receive information on what's happening, especially at the state legislative level, on items related to transportation. For some of those regions, they also deal with housing. in infrastructure and understand what legislative actions or policies the governor's office or state legislature is going, and how do we respond to those, or what things we may see as an impact, or what the state agencies may be doing to implement legislation that has been passed. So they're a key conduit for us to track and also comment. They're heavily involved, their staff, in meeting with state legislative folks on a regular basis, providing advice to us on how to respond to things. They also help with government to government communication. So if we have a real concern about something and want to talk about some certain key folks as state agency or even legislative folks that are not normally in our district but are proposing something, they will help facilitate those discussions. They also provide some general education, and they do lead the regional leadership, the Academy of Regional Leaders, since 2018. To be on the CALCOG Board of Directors, they have representatives from the 47 different members, and it has to be a voting member. The prior representative for SRTA was Kristen Schrader, and since she's no longer on, we don't have a member on the Board of Directors at this point. In talking with Bill Higgins, the executive director, one thing he advised was possibly consider having it as a representative for 2 years rather than one, due to the types of topics and the involvement at the regional level. But the board is free to choose however you wish, a one-year appointment or a 2-year appointment. This appointment would take effect immediately, and the first board meeting for the CALCOG Board of Directors is at the upcoming March Regional Leadership Forum that is in Riverside. With that, I'll happy to answer any other questions, but I'll hand it over to the board for discussion.
I'm ready to nominate, so
Go ahead.
I'd like to nominate Tanessa Audette.
I'll second that. Vanessa, are you okay with that? You have a job.
Yeah, especially
kids.
with, but I work for Senator Daly's office, and he's actually on the transportation committee, and there are
That would be
some
good.
That'd
pretty
be good.
serious bills coming up. And so if I can be of service additionally, I would, be happy to be able to communicate for our whole region, what's coming up and fighting for us at that level. So happy to do it.
And I think you're on board with me to go to the CALCOG meeting,
Yes.
correct?
Because
I plan to go on every field trip with you, Mark, that I could possibly get on.
And I went on quite a few of them with Kristen, and there's a lot of really good information, and you go to those meetings, so I encourage you to go.
Okay,
Thank
we have
you.
a motion and a second. Call for the vote, Amy?
Great, thank you. Board Member Audette,
Yes.
Board Member Rickert,
Yes,
Board Member Mazzano,
Yes.
Board Member Watkins,
Yes.
Member Newts,
Yes.
Board Member Garment,
Yes.
and Board Member Jones.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Item number 7, public comment period. This is the time set aside for citizens to address the board on consent agenda items or matters not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of the board. By law, the board cannot discuss or take any action on matters not on the agenda, but may schedule an item for future meetings. Do we have anybody for public comment, Amy?
I don't have anyone in the email.
We have some additional attendees, but nobody wishes to make comment at this time.
Okay, having that, we'll close the public comment and move to item number 8, the consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless good cause is shown prior to the time the agency votes on the motion to approve. Those are items 8-2 through 8. From the board, does anybody have anything they'd like to discuss?
Chair Mazzano, I'd like to just abstain on the minutes part of that because I wasn't at the last meeting.
Okay. Did you get that, Amy?
Sorry, I don't know. I
Garmin is
can't-
going to abstain from the vote because he was not at the last meeting.
Perfect, thank you.
I'll go ahead and move approval.
A motion to approve.
I'll second.
Second from Watkins. The motion was from Rickard.
Great. Let's have a
Move
roll
on.
call vote.
Roll call vote, please.
Roll call vote. Board Member Audette,
Yes.
Board Member Rickert,
Yes,
Board Member Mazzano,
Yes.
Board Member Watkins,
Yes.
Board Member Newts.
Yes.
Then let the record show that Board Member Garmin is abstaining. And then Board Member Jones,
Yes.
Great, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Motion carries. Item number 9, the executive director's report.
Yeah, I just have, you're almost done with me through here. I have 2 items for today for discussion for the board as an update. One is, just as a reminder, I brought this up previously, is that on April 12th and 13th, we will be hosting a town hall for the California Transportation Commission in partnership with our North State Super Region partners. So there have been requests for CTC to want to come back up here north of Sacramento. Actually, the CTC commissioners are looking to do a tour across the state for a bunch of town halls, wanting to go to a lot of different places they've never been to before or have not been to for a while, rather than the urban areas that they commonly have their meetings at. So we'll be working with our North State Super Region partners to host a 2-day event. On the afternoon of April 12th, we'll have a series of presentations related to projects and or priorities in this region, as well as with our regional partners north of the Sacramento area, the 16-county area. And then on day 2, on the 13th, we'll be having some tours of some different facilities in the area. Those are still being ironed out and finalized. Once we have those kind of figured out, we'll be sending out some information announcements related to the event, the times of those, as well as an invitation to participate for that. The California Transportation Commission oversees a lot of the transportation funding in the region. It does give us a chance also to meet individually with staff prior to the meeting to talk about other issues that we know are important to us as a smaller, more rural area and small urban areas. And then being able to share things with the CTC commissioners that they can consider as they think about how to provide input to their staff to make advocacy on funding programs with state legislature and other activities. So stay tuned on that for more information. The other thing I wanted to bring up is related to a couple of bills. So right now, we've kind of essentially at the statewide level finished the legislative process where all of our assembly and Senate members at the state introduced a whole myriad of bills all over the place.
And noticed.
Yes, there's a whole bunch of them. CALCOG helps us with trying to then narrow those down for ones that may have a regional importance. 2 of those I wanted to talk about, one somewhat beneficial, one not so and more concerning. The first one is more positive. It's Senate Bill 411. This is being proposed to make actually a couple of minor changes to the Brown Act to allow for alternate teleconferencing provisions that we were allowed during the COVID, state of emergency, where we didn't have all of the posting notifications and all those requirements that had to be done and well in advance. Part of the discussion on this is the fact that it's focusing on regional boards and commissions primarily. And the focus here is the fact that, especially in the big urban areas even, so like in the Sacramento, LA area, the regional agencies are covering many counties. So travel for local city and county representatives can be cumbersome and be difficult when they have a myriad of different meetings as elected officials and boards that they sit on. So they're possibly going to allow for it's a little bit easier for regional agencies, at least for remote participation in meetings is what they're looking at. It does not sound like that is something that will provide more favor for local city or county boards, but that could change. And the language out there is very vague and light at the moment. So as the legislative process goes through, we'll get more details about what they think that might be for the changes to the Brown Act. The other one, which is of more concern, is Assembly Bill 7. This is actually a repeat bill. This is the second time this is being introduced by Assemblywoman Friedman. The bill is essentially proposing to eliminate single occupancy vehicle freeway capacity projects. Now, we've already experienced this a little bit as a challenge working with Caltrans District 2 to continue to work on getting 3 lanes on I-5 all the way as part of a regional priority from Cottonwood up to the city of Shasta Lake, at least for now. And now we get creative in the types of solutions and funding sources that we go for and how do we deal with that. Not only on that side of the bill being proposed, it's also proposing to only allow capacity projects for bus rapid transit, rail, active transportation purposes, projects that do significantly add safety or reduce congestion, with a goal though of making sure that the projects also don't interfere with existing maintenance or rehabilitation needs. As I mentioned, this is a repeat bill. CALCOG is also watching this one closely. The prior board of directors of CALCOG had a huge concern with the bill that was proposed last year. Continues to be a lot of concern. But the language, there's not much available yet, other than kind of the summary which I've provided to you. One good thing that we at least know is going to be happening soon is that there is a planned informational session at the upcoming CALCOG Regional Leadership Forum, specifically with Assemblywoman Friedman and her staff to talk about this bill and also another one that she has proposed. We're hoping during then that we can get clarification and determine what next steps to take. I anticipate that during the CALCOG Board of Directors meeting on Tuesday afternoon, there probably will be some discussion about that bill as well after the session. So that's kind of just a summary of what we have for now. Don't know what action we may or may not want to take in terms of a comment letter or anything like that. We would probably want to consult with CALCOG also as next steps once we have some more information. But I'm just putting that out there for you to be aware of, because I know that can be of concern because it could tie to other projects that might be of local interest or concern as well.
So Sean, our truck climbing lane, our truck lane for snow times and get it through Reading, it sounds like there was an exemption for that for safety.
So for safety perspective, that's what it says in a highlight view. Now the summary language that's provided also doesn't even address freight. So freight isn't even mentioned in here, which is what a lot of people are like, well, wait a second, what about freight needs and things through mountain passes, et cetera? So that is something else that needs some clarification between Assemblywoman and Friedman and her staff of what were their thoughts of this bill, and as well as other things that were not mentioned that regional agencies across the board are concerned about.
So if you were to able to meet with her and her staff, you could talk about our third truck lane through Reading and how in the wintertime it's essential for.
Correct. Yeah, that is one of the things that we can be able to bring up as something that, hey, your proposed language isn't addressing needs like this in areas. So yes.
So are they going to try and eliminate the commuter lanes with 2 more passengers in the dense areas? Is that what they're-
No, so you're what they call the high occupancy vehicle lanes. Those, of course, will always be encouraged as part of that. What they're just saying is they're not wanting to support capacity increasing projects that are just increasing a general lane, which they target specifically as being for the single occupancy vehicle.
Sean, let me ask you, what was the objection last year?
Overall, I think the objection was that the language was vague, and there was a lot of pushback that it didn't seem like it was really thought out, really in terms of the process of what it was meant. There's a lot of other categories of different types of projects not really mentioned that might be classified as capacity increasing that really aren't because they're not dealing with other issues. I know in some of our more rural regional areas, they've even had pushback on shoulder projects where they're actually dealing with trying to have one side of a freeway section or a major corridor, a wide shoulder for evacuations in fire, like the Paradise incident. And they're getting pushback even on that with some projects of saying, well, that might be considered capacity increasing because you might change the lane. And like their argument has been no, because we're actually going for adaptation and fire evacuation funding. That's what the purpose is for. So it's a challenge even our rural partners, even more rural than us, are starting to see. So.
Is there any possible way, obviously, she's probably concerned of capacity increasing in her area, and they may be at capacity. But obviously, for rural counties, it's different. Is there any language that could give some exceptions for rural areas that still are relying on growth?
Right now, it's unclear to know because what we have right now is just a summary of the intent of what they want to do. There's no clear language that spells out a whole bunch of reasons of what they intend to do in the proposed language. So we don't have anything to work off yet related to exceptions, but it is a good point to be able to make up of there may need to be a variety of exceptions in areas that are less developed. And that could be something that we comment on in the future as well.
I was going to say, is there something that we as a board could send a letter of
Well,
kind of direction or?
what I was going to suggest, Mary, is that at the CALCOG, because we'll be there,
Yeah.
we'll hear the presentation and then perhaps we get with CALCOG while we're
Oh, you're
there
there, okay.
and then develop
Good.
a
You
plan.
can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's too early to say right now to do any sort of action. I think we need
Still in draft form.
information. Bill Higgins with Director of CALCOG even said this is a watch and we need more info type of a situation at the moment before we consider what to do. So I think after that session and the whole event, we'll have a better direction. Tanessa as our representative will be there, so we will talk about that. And then there probably will be a follow-up directors meeting with directors from regional agencies as well to talk. And at that point, maybe we can come back to the board with an update in April and what might next steps be as we're a little bit further down the legislative cycle and what we're hearing.
I can also let you know what comes up in committee, if it's read in committee and any of the things that get pushed back in committee. Transportation
Somebody
committee.
on the inside track.
Yeah. That, so
I want to take advantage of her, but we like that.
Yeah, so I'm saying more to come on that one.
Okay.
We'll keep you updated and apprised of what next steps we might want to take.
All right. Moving on, thank you very much, Sean. Item 10, we have to, I think, meetings or conference that was reimbursed by SRTA that took place? Anything anybody has to report? Okay. Let's move on to item 11, approval as resolution 23-01, authorizing the executive director to submit a 2022 State Transportation Improvement Program, STIP, amendment for the Cottonwood Active Transportation Trunk Line Express Cattle Project. This will require a motion, and who's going to present?
I will be presenting on this one. On this item, we have more of a formal action being asked of the board. Typically, as we get funding for projects, we program these in the Regional Transportation Improvement Program locally in the region for any project significance of federal and state funds and matching regional shares. The last Regional Transportation Improvement Program was approved in December of 2021, which is then incorporated into the state's full plan of all the different projects across the state funded and programmed with funding in given years on their phases in terms of right-of-way, environmental, and when those projects are planned to be constructed. And so the state can plan for when the requests for those funds obligated for those projects are going to come through. In December of this last year, we were notified that for Shasta County's cattle project, that it had actually been over-programmed in one phase, under-programmed in another. In following up with the California Transportation Commission staff to see what options we had, which are few given very tight, strict regulations of the STIP process amendments, what we identified that the best solution we had was to actually exchange funds with another regional agency. We don't do this too often because we don't find a need. In a lot of other regions in urban areas or areas that get air quality money, so CMAQ funds, small regions will do this often. They will take their small amount of shares, trade those with a larger region for a larger amount of the same amount at a later project, so they have funds available. In this case, what we're proposing to do is to exchange the COVID STIP shares, which must be obligated and spent by June of 2024, with the Tulare County Association of Governments, in which they will use those funds towards a project they have that can use the fund next year. In exchange, they will provide back to SRTA and Shasta County the same amount in a portion of their regional STIP shares that they receive, which we can then program in the correct phase, the construction phase of the cattle project. What this does is, one, it ensures the state doesn't lose any money because the COVID STIP shares are federal funds that we have. We don't lose any of our share of funds available for projects. Shasta County's project as whole, and everyone will benefit out of this situation that we have found ourselves in. One of the following items that we have is the resolution is meant to allow us to have so the CTC staff can move forward with the exchange agreement and get that planned by the end of this fiscal year. Then in December of this year, Tulare County and SRTA will both then program those funds in our 2024 Regional Transportation Improvement Program for the cattle project. Included as attachment with the resolution is a draft memorandum of understanding, which TCAG and SRTA staff developed, to essentially spell out all of the details of how we will make all of this happen between the exchange, the programming of funds, and essentially show that we're both committed to supporting each other. I think it's more important for us as the agency who will be getting the funds later rather than earlier. We felt and saw this as a model, and it's done commonly. So before you, what this allows us to do is Also make sure we don't lose any funds to the region. We've worked with Shasta County Department of Public Works, PCAG, staff, Caltrans District 2, Caltrans headquarters, and California Transportation Commission to iron out all these details, which will do after the action. With that, I'll hand it over if there are any questions.
Questions from the board?
So what's going to happen if we pass a resolution and then you're going to go to Tulare County and you're going to sign this
MOU?
MOU and Theodore Smalley will sign it
Correct.
so that we get the money back later.
Exactly.
Looks like a win-win.
It is.
Yeah, this is-
I discussed this at length with Sean the other day, and I think they've crossed all the Ts and dotted the Is on this one. And it makes good use so that we don't lose the money.
And that's, that's good that they're willing to be flexible enough to be able to do something like.
Yeah, it is a little unique situation with CTC staff. There are some nuances that they have with the STIP regulations and how they amend funds and do everything. But one of the things that did work in our favor is exception, as well as the fact that these are federal COVID funds. The state doesn't want to lose either.
Right.
And they have to be spent by June of 2024. So that allows us really to be able to do this in that instance. Hopefully next time, there won't be a next time on something like this, and that we'll be able to work with our state partners to make sure this gets caught earlier so staff can amend this administratively and not have to come back to the board for any type of a formal action.
Okay, no further comment. Amy, is there any public comment on this?
I do not see any online. Michael?
Nor do I.
Okay, no further comment, no public comment. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion to approve resolution 23-1.
And I'll second that.
Okay, I still have a question.
Okay.
How did you find Tulare County would work with you on this? I want to give you some credit.
So Keith and I both, we had to spend some time scrambling around to figure this out. So we got with CTC staff and said, hey, who are a bunch of different partners that we might be able to work with? So they went through kind of folks that they knew from a programming capacity we might be able to work with. So then we started calling and emailing different partners to see what they had available and not, depending on timing of projects. That's how we identified and got with Tulare. They said, yeah, we got a project. And they were all over it right away once we got to chat with them, make sure we made some clarifying things. CTC staff said, yep, you'd be all good to go. The projects work. That's how we figured it out. So
Well, that's good, Sean. We'll give you a higher rating when we rate you.
No. And, and that's thinking outside the box, and that, I really appreciate that
It is.
kind of proactive, kind of creative thinking.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
Okay, Amy, that was Stan on the motion and Mary seconded. And do a roll call vote, please.
Great. Board Member Audette?
Aye.
Board Member Rickert?
Yes.
Board Member Mazzano?
Yes.
Board Member Watkins?
Yes.
Board Member Newts?
Yes.
Board Member Garmin?
Yes.
And Board Member Jones?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, moving on to item 12, reviewing of the draft work elements and planning budget for the fiscal year 23-24 overall work program. And
Michael's going to do this one.
Michael is doing that remotely. He's down the hall.
Wow.
Hello, good afternoon, Chair Mazzano and members of the board. I'm here to discuss the draft fiscal year 2023-24 overall work program, or OWP for short. The OWP serves three primary functions. The first is it is a requirement for an MPO like SRTA to develop and adopt an annual OWP for the receipt of federal and state transportation dollars. It also serves as a reference document for the public, agencies, and elected officials who desire to understand SRTA's objectives and how these are being met through a continuing, cooperative, and comprehensive planning process known as the 3 Cs. And it serves as a management tool to ensure that all transportation planning activities are being accomplished on schedule and within budget. The OWP is comprised of 4 primary sections. Section 1 describes regional transportation planning responsibilities, priorities, and methods. Section 2 describes how the regional transportation planning process aligns with federal and state funding priorities. Section 3 outlines current year challenges and opportunities that our work program aims to address. Section 4 describes the agency's revenues, expenditures, and work program divided into work elements. The annual OWP update process takes place over several months with several opportunities for the Board of Directors to guide the process. In December, the board adopts regional planning priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. Staff then begins development of the OWP informed by these priorities. In February, staff presents a draft OWP for board review and guidance, like we're doing now. The draft OWP incorporating board comments is then submitted to Caltrans, the Federal Transit Administration, and the Federal Highway Administration for review. At the end of March, CERTA receives comments from federal and state agencies and revise the OWP as needed. In April, the final draft of the OWP is adopted by the CERTA Board of Directors, and the OWP package is then submitted to Caltrans, the FTA, and the FHWA. Following the narrative portion of the OWP are the work elements, which describe the work to be done, provide a schedule, and break out the fund sources. The majority of the work listed in the upcoming fiscal year's OWP is not new. Some of it is carryover or continuing work from the previous fiscal year. Some of it is ongoing tasks, and some is routine administrative tasks. There are, however, 4 new work elements. 707.17 will be funded by fiscal year 2023-24 formula funds and proposes to evaluate opportunities to create more efficient and cost-effective public transit services. The next two, 70307 and 70505, are related to competitive planning grant applications that are being submitted. One application will help local agencies prepare the next round of capital grant-ready active transportation projects, and the other will help update and modernize CERTA's data management system and tools. The final one is an information-only work element requested by FHWA to help track non-consolidated planning grant funds, or CPG funds, in the region and has no fiscal impact to CERTA. The proposed budget is a little shy of $5 million, which is a little less than $300,000 more than the original budget for the fiscal year we are currently in. This represents increased federal revenues, anticipation of receiving state competitive planning funds, and prior board-approved cost of living adjustments. Are there any questions or comments?
Questions from the board? Amy, is there any public comment?
I do not see any online.
Nor do I.
Okay, that's informational. We can move on. If there are no questions from
Yeah.
the board.
So no vote is needed.
Let's move on to item 14. And we're moving on from 12 to 14 because there's a superstition somewhere that the number that falls in between isn't a good number.
I support that today.
Okay, so item 14, you're on.
Great, thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair Mazzano. And Michael, do you mind getting my PowerPoint going, please?
Yep.
For agenda item 14. Good afternoon, board members and partners and members of the public. I'm Jennifer Pollum, Senior Transportation Planner with CERTA. And today I'm presenting on the annual Transit Needs Assessment and Preliminary Recommendations. At the end of this, a public hearing is required. I like that I'm following on the OWP because it already started talking about our fiscal years. But just to bring some clarity to this, we are looking at fiscal year 23-24 that starts July 1 of this year for the annual transit needs assessment. We review the last completed year, which would be 21-22, and we're currently in 22. So just as we go through the numbers, understand that this is for next year, starting July 1. I'm gonna explain to you what the performance, why we annually perform a transit needs assessment. Next slide. So the reason that we perform a transit needs assessment is because under TDA, the Transportation Development Act, CERTA may use local transportation funds for non-transit uses, such as streets and roads, only if it can be demonstrated that there are no unmet transit needs in the region that are reasonable to meet. The Transportation Development Act is made up of two fund sources, the Local Transportation Fund and the State Transit Assistance Fund. State transit assistance can only be used on transit funding. So we're not really dealing with that today. We'll be coming back to you in April with some information about both of these. But for the LTF, Local Transportation Fund, to be used on non-transit purposes, we have to determine there are unmet transit needs and that those unmet transit needs are reasonable to meet. Next slide. So what does the transit needs assessment entail? We will look at transit dependent. We have looked at transit dependent populations, including both the dependent and the ones that might have a need for transit services. We do public outreach. I'll come back to that, but we did do a survey in January, posted information on our website, social media, bus flyers on both the Reading Area Bus Authority buses and the Shasta Connect vehicles. And for this one, we did reach out directly to the VA clinic and the Cal Vet home off of Knighton Road for direct outreach and provided the flyers to them, and they were able to share them as they desired. They wanted to do that themselves. We also then make certain we focus on that reasonable to meet definition. So next slide. These are the sections that are included in the transit needs assessment. I kind of just went over those, but we do have a nice executive summary. It's not, the one that you see in the draft online is not complete because we don't have it finalized. There will be an introduction. We will talk about the Reading Area Bus Authority, Shasta Connect, and any other transit providers in the region. We do a transit demand analysis related to those populations that have a transit need or a transit demand. We look at existing performance, and that's where I talked about where we look at the fiscal year 21, 22. We bring that into the fold and we look at the past history of how our transit providers are doing. We do community outreach or explain what community outreach was done. And then we talk about what potential service improvements we could have starting July 1. Next slide, please. A lot of information. This is in the staff report. This is some of the very basic information that shows up in the transit needs assessment. But what you'll see in this is that the Reading Area Bus Authority fare box recovery, which we would hope is the goal is to have it at around 18% for our region, is sitting at for fiscal year 21-22 at 9.8%. The 5-year average for the Reading Area Bus Authority fare recovery is a little over 12%. We need that to be closer to 18%. That is part of the Transportation Development Act, and that is something that CALCOG, the organization that Sean was talking to you about prior, and another organization that we work with, the California Transit Association, they also are working on that to possibly change Transit Development Act. We have been in during the COVID pandemic and the state of emergency that Sean mentioned, we have been had the opportunity to not be penalized for not meeting our goal of 18% fare box recovery, but that's going to be ending. And next year, we're going to be coming back to, if TDA does not change, we'll be coming back with something that we haven't done in this region before with the possibility of penalties. Excuse me. Bernie Express is not exactly part of the Reading Area Bus Authority. It is a service that is contracted by Shasta County, and the Reading Area Bus Authority provides that service. But it is a Shasta County Public Works service. It is also not meeting its fare box recovery. The rural areas have a 10% goal. And this one, the Bernie Express right now is just under 3%. Shasta Connect is a service that was rebranded. We've had Dignity Health Connected Living under contract with SRTA for a while to provide our Coordinated Transportation Services Agency, CTSA services. And they've been doing that for us for a very long time. We did rebrand it at Shasta Connect over the last few years. And it's a new delivery paradigm that we're looking at to have on-demand transit and not necessarily a fixed route transit service. Part of that is that it has an application that can look at shared rides. So similar to Uber or Lyft or whomever, you don't necessarily have the services running all the time on a fixed route. They only run as they are called upon to do so.
I have a question.
Yes.
On your top chart there, 5-year average, 517K. I'm presuming that in 17, 18, and 19 fiscal years that we had a lot.
We had much better. I think actually in 17, 18, maybe it was a really good year. And that is included in the transit needs assessment. And if we wanted to, I have a very, very last slide that shows charts of all these things. So we could jump to that.
Just curious. And so COVID basically hit the ridership.
All
tremendously.
transit agencies are nationwide.
Now, and then we keep talking about fare box recovery, which is always kind of a hot topic at RABA. Are those goals unrealistic?
Whether they're realistic or not is outside of what we discussed because it's a requirement in the Transportation Development Act. So that's why the Transportation Development Act needs to be changed. It has a minimum for an urban area. It has a minimum fare box recovery of 15%.
Yeah, I get that.
Okay.
But I've heard that time and again. So it looks like to me that the number's really unrealistic for rural areas.
Yeah, and we are an urban area between the three cities. That's the urban area. And then the RABA does serve, but certain areas of it are more rural. That's why we kind of did that negotiation because it actually has between 20 and 15%. And we went to 18% for the rating area bus authority because it serves both rural and urban. Because I think the TDA actually has a goal of 20, minimum of 15% fare box recovery.
We saw something very interesting in Anderson when the little electric motor scooter came in. RABA went down a little bit and the route between the apartment complexes and the major shopping areas went up. So people would rather use their little cards to activate the scooter as opposed to paying RABA. That's just something we've noted.
Thank you. That's actually, it's a very good comment to pay attention to. And I'll look at that. I actually didn't know that there were scooters in Anderson. So thank you for that. I don't know if they're run by, I have a call out to the.
It's a private firm running it.
Is it the same one that's here in Reading?
I suspect.
Okay.
What is our goal to solve the problem? Do we have?
That's my question.
That's where, as we've talked about in this group, before the board previously, is we're looking at different paradigms for delivery. And that is what we're looking at the Shasta Connect possibly for any lower performing routes on the fixed route system to pull those out and maybe try to serve them with demand response. The Reading Area Bus Authority right now is going through their short range transit plan and looking at some of these also. So the goal is for those planning documents, the long range transit plan that we adopted a couple of years ago and the short range transit plan to make recommendations.
I mean, the fare box ratio, that's the worst that I've ever seen. And of course, you don't take in consideration capital expenditures. So realistically, the number is even lower than that.
One thing that I'll add, in terms of our role as sort of as the NPO is to do, part of it's the survey. Say, hey, here's the things identified and there's things that may potentially be reasonable to meet or may not be reasonable to meet. After that analysis, we go back to the transit operators. So Steve Biggs, Executive Officer RABA, we would go to his staff and say, hey, here are some different things that came in through the survey. Here's the things that maybe they are, maybe they aren't. And we would then reach out to them and RABA would look at it from an operations standpoint and say, hey, yes, we think something could work, something couldn't work. And so you go through that iterative process. On the Shasta Connect side, we work with Dignity Health Connected Living, that operator, on anything that may be relevant to their operations that they do, review and go over things with them. We don't dictate from that perspective in terms of the agency other than say, hey, here's what we find during the survey and the analysis. The fare box ratio is where it's at. And, we need to work towards this goal, which is a TDA statute. It's not a SRTA statute. And I think that sometimes gets is a misnomer is that TDA law sets the opportunities you have. They've got the urban fare box recovery ratio and a rural fare box recovery ratio. And then they have if you have a mixed system, you have some variance that the MPO could make a decision to lower it from the typical standard urban ratio. But again, at 15%, that's the lowest even SRTA could go for any type of a rural or an urban or mixed urban rural service. then the rural services had the 10%. So
Chuck, this question might be better for you.
But 1 second.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I forgot. We have Steve Bade, the new city manager, assistant city manager for, everybody knows him? Because he hasn't always been. He's been here twice now, I think. And then our public works director, Mr. Chuck Auckland. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Given this 9.8% for the fare box ratio, so for everybody, for every dollar we spend, we're getting 9.8 cents back on every dollar. Given capital expenditures, are we getting close to zero? I mean, realistically, consider capital expenditures. I mean, no one's really ever figured that in, I guess, but.
Yeah, it's not a requirement to figure in. Maybe a couple of points of context is on the positive side is that.
It's not looking really positive.
No, it's not. On the positive side, prior to COVID, we were able to meet the 15% for a number of years. This 9.8% is the lowest that I've ever seen it. And yeah, if you factor in capital construction, although we don't have a huge capital budget, it's mostly just replacing vehicles at a time. But that certainly is an effect. So the pandemic certainly had its effect on that. As Jen mentioned, we are in the middle of doing the short-range transit plan that is looking at different models of how to provide that service. Maybe there is time that we look at serving it a little bit different way. The problem with the way that it's currently served, it's kind of a hub and spoke. So if you have a route out here, because we have sort of main routes that go around a big portion, at least the city of Reading, and then we have spurs that go out. But you have then pieces that serve different neighborhoods, and if you take a neighborhood off, A, there's equity issues, and B, you're necessarily cutting off what's going to be on that main route, and then you're making the system even less efficient and less appealing for folks to do it. So there may be a way to do it as a hybrid of an on-demand in certain areas that just bring you to a transit stop along that trunk line, so maybe we can reduce that in. The second thing I want to give you some context on is that there are some potential changes going on with Reading's downtown. We have an agreement, actually, when the new housing opens, it's on California Street. They have agreement that they have to buy transit passes for their folks through. It's actually grant funded, but they're buying transit passes for each one of their tenants. And so that'll be a significant increase in revenue. We're also leasing the parking lot downtown to the city of Reading to pay for parking, and so that is some revenue that will come in. So there's some dynamics that may change with different models, and but yeah, it's I'm not going to kid anybody. It is a social service in this town. There are folks that have to use that system, and trying to operate as efficiently as possible and meet the goals that SRTA is required to for the state, so that we can use funds. We all wear sort of two hats, right? One is our agency and the streets and roads, and the other is, the transit system that we all have to try to make as efficient as possible. But you bring up good points. It's certainly not an efficient system right now.
I mean, in the private sector, I mean, here we're probably talking, we spend $1 and we're probably getting, 5 to 6 cents back on the dollar. And for as long as I've been around with RAB and whatnot, they've probably never received more than 20 cents back on the dollar, as the best that they've ever done. It just seems like with private sector, there's a massive difference. They're in the private sector, they're going to get their dollar back and, more, but yet we can't even break even. And now we're getting down to the point where we're almost spending $1 and getting zero back, if anything at all. So it just seems like whatever we've been doing the last few years with regards to that. And it's not so much that whatever is required by the state, I just think we should be doing better ways and with public funds. And so I'm just concerned about public transportation in the Reading area, just, being able to improve that. And it seems like what we're doing is opposite. It's just trying to look out for the best interests of the taxpayers. We're going in a different direction, that's all. And so it's just frustrating.
Well, I think that there's been some grace. Obviously, the pandemic has put us in the back seat. And are we seeing some movement in the right direction or none at all?
Oh, we did actually. We did see a little increase in Ridership, you can see, went up by 11,000 and fare box recovery actually went up slightly. So
And if we raise the gas prices back to $6 a gallon, we'll pick up ridership.
that is what happened when we've seen really good ridership is gas
Okay,
prices.
so that's happening. So I'm optimistic, but I have to agree, we're on the losing side of it.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Right. And again, I do want to reiterate, this is not, we are not the only ones that are having these issues. This is happening nationwide where it's taking a while for transit ridership to come back to pre-pandemic levels.
And I'm anxious to see the new plan that they're working on, to see how that's going to impact it.
Yeah, and as Jen noted, Raba actually performed better than 4 of 6 in 4 of 6 categories than 10 comparative agencies.
Oh, okay.
It's hitting everybody, equally. And then a couple other context things to Mr. Jones's comments is that I agree with you. It's not a private business. It will always be subsidized because then you would be, to take an Uber Lyft from here to there, it's going to take you $15-16 a trip, and the folks that are riding the system simply can't afford to do that. And so this system is subsidized. And then if you don't meet those ratios, if you do cut your service and you eliminate transit, then you're going to eliminate your potential for that street funding as well. And so there's some downside to that as well.
And one of the, I was gonna say,
Robert only of the $10 or $11 million that come in a year to SRTA, Robert only uses about 2.5-3 million of it. The rest goes to us agencies for street road repair.
So imagine if we put 11 million towards public transportation.
Yeah.
There's.
Okay.
Yes, so I'm looking at the Bernie Express and they have kind of abysmal figures here. So is there any hope for this or is this just always going to continue to be so?
So while I've been here, we added a 3rd route to Bernie Express and that went up and did well for a while and then the pandemic hit.
Right.
I think that the state has given us this grace period to get it back and I believe that there might be, at the state level, and maybe with the influence of the larger transit agencies, a real push to change the Transportation Development Act.
Did the incident on 299 with the gentleman that attacked the driver, did that have anything have you noticed a problem?
I feel like if you have one bad story, you can affect transit ridership.
Yeah.
That's just the way it goes with media. Like if you have one negative story as opposed to all the wonderful things. And the quotes that I have from the survey that I'm going to share with you, this is it is a social service or a safety net. There are people that are using the service. They have no other option.
You're right.
So to provide the service is, an equity issue.
I'll just say too, one of the things that we have to think too is, the reason we are seeing some of the numbers we are too is because of the pandemic as well. But it is a question not just for us, but a lot of different operators across the state, bigger urban areas and smaller as well, that are not seeing the recovery is trying to understand why, because it's travel behavior. And if your regions are still growing, and if there's other factors like at population, who's living and where are they living? And if you're generally not changing a whole lot, then there's something that's changing in travel behavior. Either people are traveling less, or they're having other options, or somehow the travel demographic is changing as well. So those are other factors that play in. The one thing I will say Raba has also done is throughout, they continue to maintain the same service throughout. Granted, they have different restrictions on how close people could be and everything else for a while. And still being able to maintain that, yet we're not seeing the rebound that we would hope to see once things kind of really open back up and a lot of the social distancing was removed on all those requirements. So part of it is also trying to understand what's the travel behavior changes taking place in our region that's also affecting us, regardless of the fact that the service has continued to stay the same on that end. So, and sometimes that can be a harder thing to tie it down to try to understand without, surveying a whole bunch of the community to understand, including past riders, what do we have changing that's causing that? And is that also something that the transit operators are going to need to try to figure out how to deal with in the future? These are some questions that are tougher to answer and they're going to take us some time to try to look at as part of that process.
So we're not meeting the requirement for the fare box ratio. So what, if that trend continues, what does that make us ineligible for? What does that cost us?
The portion, it comes down to when that kicks in, because there's even a time period after that, a grace period. When the penalty kicks back in, there's a grace period after that. So we do have some time. But it basically says that we have to pay into whatever is not met to get us to the 15 minimum percent we have to pay for it.
What kind of money are we talking? What does that look like?
I believe it would
The
be.
difference.
Sorry?
Oh, I would assume you have to pay the difference.
Yeah, you pay what the difference, and it's basically a loss in LTF, local transportation funds, and coming from, I imagine, we haven't done the general fund,
No.
I imagine.
I would imagine that if we're building affordable housing in town where then people don't actually have to bus into town where they work, that ridership, I mean, our best efforts to create walkable downtown and putting all that affordable housing downtown, that's a lot of our market that would be living outside of town, coming downtown. So if it continues on that trend, I would think we would need to change our bus routes so that more than people that need it would be using it. Because if we have bike lanes now that come in that are, safer for people to take their bikes to work, less people are driving, and it's easier to get to, we have all those new affordable housing units opening downtown, I would think that would actually make our ridership go down, or having routes that go directly from those housing units straight into, Hilltop where the mall is. So I would think that us looking at how we're doing our routes, because it's not going to get better, I don't think, with how we're planning and developing. I just think we have to be smarter about what kind of routes we're providing, and maybe we change who we're targeting, not just people that can't drive, but people that don't want to.
Well, my point is that maybe we look at it completely different. Maybe we skip the fare box ratio altogether, just call it free transportation. What do we lose when we get to that point? What occurs? I mean, you're trying to get somewhere that you haven't been getting for decades, rarely. So what if we just simply say we're not going to do that? What are we losing?
That's millions, I think. It's the money that we
You're
lose.
gonna pay the difference.
You're going to pay the difference, and you're going to lose the street money, aren't you, Chuck?
It's not actually, so.
Yes.
I think the operational budget for RABA is somewhere in the $5.5 to $6 million a year. So if you take 15% of that, you're 815,000. I think our fare box was somewhere in the 600,000. So you're talking a couple $100,000 a year that would be that difference that would you have to make up. That's what I'm talking about. There has been folks that have been looking to introduce legislation to make transit free. As a matter of fact, in California, they've talked about that before. So
We're already
I don't know where the legislation.
we're almost there, so it won't be a stretch.
The only aspect you have there, if you're looking at doing free transit, then you might just augment that with the additional cost of the funds that we're not using for transit. So our transit dedicated funds, you would use those first. And you might then see it where it might impact LTF initially if you're trying to recover that additional cost. So there would be a little bit more LTF would be going towards to ensure the operations are whole on that end. And then whatever rest is remaining will then get distributed to streets and roads.
I mean, it doesn't look like we've put a tremendous amount of effort to get to the fare backs. I'm pretty sure we can get there very quickly if we want to, just by adjusting fares.
Up.
Well, that's
part of it. So that's the hard thing when you talk about equity in a population that needs a service that is not able to.
And that's part of what we discussed with the short range transit plan. That was actually brought to the RABA board. I can't remember exactly what year now. It's 14, 15. They talked about increasing fares, and the board chose at that time not to. And that's when we sort of actually dropped the fare box ratio from 19 to 15 was the absolute minimum requirement. And it had met that for a number of years up until two things happened. One, we lost the airport route, which was the fare revenue from the IASCO flight folks, and that was 2019. And then 2019 into 20 started the pandemic, and then it changed.
Yeah. And why did you lose IASCO?
They ran into some managerial issues and decided that they didn't want to pay for that service, and I was subsequently arrested. It was kind of a
Shut down.
I don't know exactly what happened in there, but
They shut
That would be
down.
part of probably one of the things I think we've reached out before, but probably talk to those folks again and see how they operate. Now they're starting to bring more pilots back in.
I mean,
How they operate, does it make sense for their system? to
We
pay?
had a higher fare box ratio before we accepted that route, and a gentleman with the bus was providing that service, and once Rabbit provided it, that particular operator was out. We had a better fare box ratio before we even had that route. So I'm just saying it's, with or with even out that route, we were doing better before. I remember when we did that, so.
It was meeting it up until the pandemic.
I have a question. This, you may not be the actual person to actually answer this, but that little fee that they actually recover, is that a barrier to keep probably some of the undesirable homeless people out of Raba?
By charging a fare, you do create a level of responsibility for passengers.
And exactly.
Yeah.
And usually some of the street folks are not very responsible in anything they do, so maybe it might be a good idea to continue to keep the fare.
Yeah, and I will say even the fares that are provided, we have other social services in the region that are providing those fares. We, RABA does some veterans outreach and to provide fares for veterans, and I believe that there's passes provided by the mission as well. So even the fares that we are getting, it's not as if the individuals themselves are always, that's not income that they are then paying out. They might be receiving that as a benefit. But definitely free fares are being considered statewide, and fares, I think, add a level of responsibility. So it's a tricky situation to be in. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Vanessa was talking about maybe changing the bus routes up and perhaps that's the time you could change fares maybe a little higher if you're trying to meet a different clientele. I don't know. I'm just a substitute here, so I don't know what the past has been, where these discussions have been, but if you're going to try to change it up and serve a little different person, maybe you could raise the fare slightly and not lose.
I agree.
Yeah, and that'll be something that Rabbit will do as part of like their short range transit plan, the fare studies. So those are things, our process here is just to be able to evaluate where things have been in last year, what's taking place, and be able to pool surveys for the community to say, hey, what are their needs that they have, and then determine if we even think they're even reasonable to meet. And then that's when we go to RABA and DHCL in that process. So those will be things that we'll be going back to them as the operator, say, hey, what are suggestions that you have? How do you think there's ways that we can improve this over time? And then, what might be a timeline for trying out some changes in services. One thing that we learn, at least typically for anything that you do change, it usually, and this doesn't matter how big or how small the service is, the change, you need 2 years typically to be able to have it where your change has gone in place, your community is aware of it, they now know it's regular, and then they're using it before you can evaluate it to say, did this really create an impact in a positive sense or a negative sense, and or it allows the operator also to make slight adjustments to that newer service, whatever it may be, whether it's routes, a new service area, extended times earlier or later in the day or something. So our process really here is to kind of see where we're at and what are the needs. And then we'll be continuing to work with RABA and DHCL throughout the process as they advise on steps they'll take.
Let's move on, and then I will continue to ask questions, ask and answer questions. I do want to point out before you go, Michael, the TDA subsidy for the Shasta Connect service, it's a subsidy. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a TDA subsidy. They were doing pretty well in Shasta Connect with prices going down. Their operating costs did increase the last year that we were analyzing, but their 3-year average is $24.89. And yeah, per trip. So if you think about shared rides, the per trip subsidy on 3 years is $25. And we have a contract goal for this year of 22-21, but we are looking at a different delivery paradigm with that using grant funds. So just, we are trying other things in the region. Okay, next slide, please, Michael. This is in your staff, or let's see, it's in the transit needs assessment. It's all the stuff that came in. We did a survey over a month long, pushed it out, and I'm gonna go through these, but realize that we did a pretty good job. We got 54 total responses. That's amazing for our area. We have not gotten responses like that in the past. It was probably because 34 of them were from the VA clinic. or the Veterans Home, or Knight Road. If you want to consider that there were 4 additional ones for the Reading Regional Airport, you know, if we were to have that route back, we have 38 requests. And then I'll kind of go through these, but the other ones, there's very few. So again, we're looking at, is it an unmet transit need and is it reasonable to meet? Reasonable to meet, we've got to be determined with discussions that we're having with RABA right now, but of the other ones, we're saying, no, we're not gonna be adding fixed route service to Country Heights, additional City of Shasta Lake services, you know, Oregon, Old Oregon Trail, you can see the list there at this time because of our fare box issues. If you can go to the next slide. Those were the current, the last one slide was for current. These are recurring requests that we've had in the past that we wanted to bring back up. Let's have some positive information here. The Whiskey Town bus, beach bus, had a 123% increase. We had a big marketing campaign on that. The Shasta County Health and Human Services Agency, Healthy Shasta, helped us with that. And we had really high ridership on the beach bus this year. That is a service that this board decided to fund. Several years ago, we went through the pandemic, we went through National Park Service issues, but last year it came back in full. We do have funding in our, because June 30th ends, we have funding through June 30th, but we are recommending, or will be recommending to fully fund this through.
What is the fare box ratio on the beach bus?
The fare, we actually paid that. It was free. We paid that with another funding source, but it did, it met the, I don't know. That's a good question.
So the beach bus has been a special service, so it doesn't have at the moment a fare box ratio
It
required.
doesn't have a requirement, but
Correct.
what amount do we collect?
Well, I mean,
Probably
the
have to go back
standard
to
rates.
see.
Yeah, I can get back to you on that.
So they are they do pay for that, yeah.
We put on the bus, it's free fares. Nobody's paying. When an individual gets on the bus, they are not paying. We should tell them that there are other fund sources that are paying for their fares at this time.
Currently, we have low carbon transit operations program funds that we have for free or reduced fares available to DHCLA and RABA for different outreach opportunities or to promote transit use. And those funds for now have been used towards beach bus to offset the actual fares that we would normally probably collect. Part of it was to see if there was still interest by the community to go out there, and last year proved that there was.
So the beach bus is really good. I mean, really free because we had a grant that paid for the fares. And we had a special deal with the Park Service that they didn't have to pay an entry fee to get it. They only pay one entry fee per.
The bus drivers have a pass, right? And we got that donated.
So it made it really economical for a
And then-
rider.
And what we also did, that is, we did determine last year it was gonna be used, state transit assistance funds which is one of those funding sources I was talking about prior. It's one of the 2 Transportation Development Act funding sources. We have reserve funds. Those can only be used on transit, and we have extra transit funds because we're not recommending new services at this time. But we did fully fund the beach bus service.
Does that bus actually go to the 2 major recreation areas at Whiskey Town, Brandy
Just one.
Creek and
Just one. It goes to Brandy.
Brandy Creek.
they go to Brandy Creek?
It actually, but it does like stop in Old Shasta. It does a route that stops at like the grocery outlet, Old Shasta, the
Visitor
visitor
center.
center. I think at the dams, because we were trying to get bike riders too, the mountain bike riders to Brandy Creek, and then
Okay.
does a turnaround. And it it's a special service though, so it's not an hourly service. It runs, I think we did it 4 times.
Just an off question, what's a monthly pass cost for Revo?
The Reading one is like $48.75, I think, and then if you go to Shasta Lake and Anderson, I think it's 81 or 2, somewhere in that.
Okay.
The other one, and we still have Sunday service on here. Those are very specific ones that we have actually introduced new service, and the Sunday service is being run by Shasta Connect. So it's an on-demand service. Next slide. This summarizes those. We're looking at Sunday on-demand service requests. We had a carryover for expanding CTSA or Shasta Connect services, possibly for Saturday service. Because like choosing routes that maybe aren't doing as well on Farebox, pulling those away and offering on-demand service on those, serving those areas instead. The beach bus, possibly making that a permanent part of the RABA service, because right now it is a special service that CERTA contracts with RABA for. reducing overlap, this low income strategy, the possibility of looking at free and reduced fares. And then because it did come up several times and we've heard about Shasta Lake requests in the past, we do have an Anderson commuter service and maybe looking at a Shasta Lake commuter service.
Would that Shasta Lake commuter service go both ways through Buckeye? Is that, or is it still a loop?
It would be up for determination, but we did have a Buckeye request and then we had a direct routes to Shasta Lake.
It's just a request.
It's just it's just a request. It's nothing that's been studied yet. These are things that we're suggesting we continue having discussions with RABA and DHCL on to explore opportunities and see if there's anything that would make sense to try.
These are what came out of the surveys that were done in January. We're in February, we're just like giving you the analysis of them.
And Jen, you know, the Vets Village is under construction now, and so that's something that you might want to consider.
The higher population, you're right.
And that will, might definitely need some transportation, so.
You mean all the new apartments on Lake Boulevard?
I can't remember what street.
Because there's no parking for them, so they're going to have to take the bus.
Yeah, it's the Vets Village.
Chuck, could such a contract be made with different routes for a large number of people for a particular short transit need? Could such a contract be made where the monthly cost would be lower than what you've mentioned?
Well, yeah, we kind of do that for like Shasta College, for example. They pay for their students. They pay X number of dollars per semester to give free rides to all their students, no matter how many rides they take. And then that kind of gets assessed each year to see how many rides and about what would that cost.
Oh, yeah.
Make sure both sides kind of agree. We did the same thing with the airport. The reason that was successful is we couldn't meet a fare box ratio if we just ran on our own. We said, hey, we can start this thing up if you agree to buy 60 monthly passes per month at a minimum. And that worked. That was enough to get like a 50-60% fare box ratio. That really helped kind of the rest of the system. And they agreed to do that. And they ended most months they had 100 students or 150 students, so they were meeting that anyway. Right at that. So there are ways to do that, fare agreements to specific target populations.
I believe we also did it with Bethel for the
Yes,
for the commute it's our only one of our few 30-minute headways, meaning the bus
Back and forth.
comes back every 30 minutes. Our headways are every hour, so if you miss a bus, you're waiting another hour for it to come by. Next slide, please. So here are the next steps. We'll continue, like the transit needs assessment was released on February 17th. It's in its draft form. We'll be having that out for public comment until March 17th. That date is important, particularly because our Social Services Transportation Advisory Council meets on March 15th, and they will make recommendations. They are council that makes a recommendation to this board about the unmet transit needs. And then we'll be coming back at the April board meeting to present the final transit needs assessment. A TDA budget, Transportation Development Act, will be before you, and the unmet transit needs recommendations. So this information will be coming back with recommendations. Next slide. Today we need to hold a public hearing on any, for the public to discuss any unmet transit needs that they are interested in or any related to any of our recommendations. Any direction from the board on the needs recommendations, and receive directional responses to comments through March 17th.
Well, with that being said, I will open public hearing. Amy?
I don't have anybody online.
And anything submitted?
None.
I have nothing online either.
That being said, then I guess I can close the public hearing.
Thank you.
This comes back before us in April, correct?
Yeah, so basically, at this time, if you need to, the board needs to provide direction to me since it's still open for public comments through the 17th, that if we are wanting to make any changes to the unmet transit needs recommendations, the draft ones that were in the report.
So you're looking for recommendation, item number 3, under staff recommendations for a motion.
Any direction on the transit, the recommendations, which were ended with the Shasta Lake commuter, all of them are consider, evaluate, look at over the next year, except for the one that was to be determined, which is the VA clinic, Veterans Home, Knighton Road. Over the next 2 months, we're gonna be working with Rob on that to see what we could do there.
So we need a motion to,
Well,
I'll make,
on our comments can we comment or make a recommendation on a separate possible route, or we're just commenting on the ones that you have?
No, please, if you have direction or anything you'd like us to add, please.
Just a thought. I think it might be an opportunity to reach out to Shasta County to have a possible situation where we have a county-owned parking lot and transfer people on a half-hour basis to county administration buildings, essentially bypassing the parking issue that we have downtown. And it would be in the morning, a couple routes in the morning and a couple routes in the evening with buses that are packed to capacity. And that might alleviate some of that will free up some parking downtown and quite possibly could save county workers considerable amount of money. So I would recommend that.
Stan, I think.
Yeah, the one comment I have on that is it looks like you can actually combine the two that you're looking at there, the VA home and the Reading Airport. They're right there, 38 requests. That's still only maybe 3 or 4 people a month. So maybe Shasta Connect might be the place to go with that.
And Shasta Connect does those areas now, Monday through Friday.
So maybe it's more of an issue, like you said there, of just educating people to know the services available.
If you notice there, thank you for pointing that out. We actually also say that we're asking our contractor, Dignity Health Connected Living, to possibly extend their hours. So we would need to work with the Reading Airport to see, when flights are coming in. We'd extend hours to meet the clinic's last patients, which can be, I think they close at 4:30. So maybe extending the service till 5 o'clock. We'll talk to Dignity Health Connected Living about that, and then also the potential for when flights arrive and depart.
Great.
If the grant funding is eliminated for the beach bus, what fare ratio would that service have to meet to continue?
To be, if it became part of the Reading Area Bus Authority's fixed route system, which then means that it could be an express service, so that's a caveat. But if it was served as a normal fixed route, it would have to have complementing paratransit, which is a 3/4 mile buffer, where they would have to provide service into the fixed route system or. Yeah, that's true. So I think we'd keep it as an express service probably, so it's still a special seasonal service. And if it was funded with TDA, it would still have to meet the 18.
The 18%. And then since you have data on what it actually costs, what would you have to charge for that service if it weren't free?
So those are things that we'd have to look into.
Well, I mean, you ought to have the figures, what the ridership and what the cost is, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other thing we would
That number.
do also is, consult the TDA as well and work with Rabbit to evaluate to say, how would you define the service? There are different things, we have exceptions and different things that are there to really determine and confirm what the actual fare box might have to be if you have that as a regular service item.
That would also dictate what your cost is going to be.
Correct.
So it would give you a little time.
Yeah.
Okay, I need a motion to,
I'll make a motion for approval.
I need a second.
Second.
Amy, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Yes, can you repeat? First was Mary and second was,
Jones.
Mary and Patrick.
okay. Great, and we will start the roll call vote with Board Member Audette,
Yes.
Board Member Rickert,
Yes.
Board Member Mazzano,
Yes.
Board Member Watkins,
Yes.
Board Member Newts,
Yes.
Board Member Garmin,
Yes.
and Board Member Jones.
Yes.
Great, thank you, everyone.
Okay, moving on to item 15. I think it's you again, huh?
It is.
piling it on you today.
So, Michael, if you could start the slideshow for agenda item 15, please. Agenda item 15 is regarding the 2022 Regional Transportation Plan. The Regional Transportation Plan is a fundamental function of the Shasta Regional Transportation Agency, similar to the transit needs assessment that we just discussed, similar to the overall work program that my colleague Michael discussed. This is a fundamental item that we do to receive funding, transportation funds for the region. The next slide, please. The Regional Transportation Plan in Shasta's region is a long-range transportation policy and planning document. It guides investments, and it is on a 4-year update cycle and was last updated in 2018. I would like to just point that our mission to this is to maximize state, federal, and other revenues for cost-effective transportation investment strategies that connect communities, people, and goods. Next slide, please. That's SRTA's mission. And this goes, so it's the RTP is a fundamental function. It's updated every 4 years. It's fiscally constrained. We have to make assumptions about how much money we'll have over a 20-year period, and we fiscally constrain our projects. It does require an environmental impact report, and all modes of transportation are considered. Just don't ask crazy questions. Okay, next slide, please. The elements of the RTP are a vision that's supported by short and long range strategies. The goals are attached to your staff report, and those were adopted by this board late last year. We evaluate the mobility needs of the different populations in the area, housing and job forecast. That's done through our travel demand model. A state requirement is a sustainable community strategy. It's from Senate Bill 375 that we are required to show a reduction in passenger vehicle, that's cars and light trucks, greenhouse gas emission reductions. And then we have the project list of improvements based on project timelines and a funding plan. That's where I said it was fiscally constrained. Next slide, please. I want to state that we are delayed in this. Obviously, it's called a 2022 RTP because the last one was 2018. We had 4 years, we're 2022, and we're delayed in providing that. We did have the goals adopted in October. We are going to be looking in February and March to be doing an RTP public workshop. That public workshop is to give the public the basics on what an RTP is and what, how we'll be proceeding with it. We'll be providing the RTP, Regional Transportation Plan, sorry. I knew I wasn't gonna do that. Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy. But in February and March, it'll need to be out for a 55-day public review, and that will span our April 27th meeting. So we'll have a public hearing at the April meeting, and then we'll wrap things up at our June meeting after we address any comments that we've received after that 55-day public review. And we'll bring it to this board in June for another public hearing, and we will certify the supplemental environmental impact report and ask for adoption of the 2022 Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy.
I'm looking at your goals here. These are quite interesting. I'm sure that they were provided to you.
We actually developed these.
A lot of help from Mr. Watkins, by the way. I've had considerable discussion about these goals.
Yeah, the vehicle miles traveled and.
Yeah, so the RTP goals are a combination of trying to prioritize both federal and state requirements of items that they have as goals that we need to be able to address as part of the long-range planning for the region, as well as then making it context sensitive to our region. So we try to make sure to the extent we can, we're addressing both of those needs within the goals. And then once with those goals, which the board spent 2 or 3 different meetings going over to develop, this is kind of the final version for this next update. Then staff, we go through and modify and update our strategies of ways that we could short-term, mid-term, and long-term, try to implement those goals.
Yeah, it's, I do see a lot of buzzwords. Single coordinated multimodal strategy. Okay.
So Sean, this is what hopefully was concerned about. Was this what he was concerned about?
No, so you're,
What's he concerned about? I'm trying to,
I think this workshop.
he's looking for opportunity to comment on
Okay.
the actual draft plan, which is not out yet, so. Yes,
very-
one member of the public has, and we've talked with him a couple of times as well to keep him apprised of the process and everything.
More than a couple.
Long Jen's had long conversations with him and everything. So, yeah, we're keeping him involved.
does he email you too? No, I've talked to him a few times, so he calls me.
Yeah, but it's more, he's looking for the opportunity to comment on the draft plan and share some of his own thoughts.
I have no doubt.
Yeah.
There are words in here that might seem buzzy. They actually are just lingo that we're used to using, that like multimodal corridor efficiencies or strategies, performance-based planning. What we see from the federal and state is they have planning priorities that show up as part of our OWP, overall work program. And those planning priorities guide the goals in the RTP and sustainable strategy.
I guess when I look at some of these goals, they harken back to my yearly attendance at the League of California Cities meetings and the ICCS conferences we go to on retail. And what we're seeing in both these entities is a push within the state of California for the 15-minute city. You understand the definition of a 15-minute city?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's.
Some of you do. That means where you live, you can walk within 15 minutes to your place of work, to your movie theater, to the doctor's office, to the dentist's office, and there's no need for a vehicle or a car. So what we're doing is we are reinventing in California 1890 New York City. Okay,
Not where I live.
Not in this town.
What I'm saying is, this concept that we see down there at these major conferences really do not apply to us up
Right,
here
that's
in
right.
any way, shape, or form.
That's
Okay?
what I'm saying.
And so if we have the opportunity to push back against that and say, look, we're very rural, and many of these goals and things that you guys have really don't apply to us, like reducing the number of vehicles and the number of truck miles and things like that. I mean, trucks and vehicles are very, very important for our commerce up here and for our way of life. If I want to go to Bernie, and I have to do a job up there, I'm going to get in my vehicle and go.
Yeah,
That is a distinction. Those are commercial. I imagine it's considered a commercial vehicle. These are passenger vehicle miles, just to clarify on that point. I do think that oftentimes we go into planner lingo in this somewhat. We are still a metropolitan area, and to my point, it'd be nice if we had more services offered here that we didn't necessarily need to go to Sacramento for. So I think that when it's talking about, when you mention a 15-minute city, I think it's just saying like, making certain that people can get things near to them and not have to travel from Bernie for maybe simple things, into Reading or down to Sacramento for them.
If you consider Reading a metropolitan area, what do you consider Sacramento?
Right, so that is a term that we are an MPO, we're a Metropolitan Planning Organization. It's any agency or urban area defined by the census that is made up of over 200,000 people. 100, what?
so the urbanized area by federal definition is a area that is urban enough to have a group of 50,000 individuals or greater. It's the federal definition that we have. So we are in the 50 to 200,000 category. We're this small metropolitan area. Then you have medium metropolitan areas between 200,000 and 1 million, and large is 1 million plus within a defined area, which is based upon the population as well as typically how many people we have per square mile.
And I think the difference there is culturally how we see ourselves versus numbers wise. We do have the 3 cities all together here, with I-5 going through them, are a center of commerce for the greater North State super region, let's say. We are an island MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, so we do not touch another county that is one of the B Butte County Associations of Government, BCAG, is the closest MPO to us. So by definition of the census and by the federal and state government, we are an MPO and an RTPA, but culturally,
I get that and I accept that, but I agree with Stan. If we're living in these affordable units down here, what do we call them these days? Is it still Block 7, Steve, or do we have a new name for it?
it is California Place.
All right, California Place. I'm sorry, that's the new name, California Place. The grocery store is all the way down at the other end.
I think there would be a lot of people be happy if Market Center
Yes.
would have a grocery store underneath.
Safeway, maybe. It's not big enough.
Yes, I mean, you are correct that the Safeway is far, and I would say the Reading Grocery Outlet is even further. So having the ability to buy things closer to you, where you don't necessarily have to own a vehicle to get to them, is good. I live really close to there, and there are quite a few people who walk on East Street to go to Safeway. So I think that a center of commerce, which the downtown is, and we do in some view consider Safeway and even City Hall, adjacent to downtown, an area of commerce. And that's why we do these affordable housings.
And part of what we're doing with the regional transportation, but we are balancing those things about these different definitions of how areas are defined. And not all of our, so we're unique in that we're a one county region and we cover the entire county of Shasta County in our situation. But portions of our area are urban by those, and other portions are not, right? So within this, we are balancing how to address federal and state priorities and our goals so we can continue to receive our formula funds and be competitive for grant funds, for infrastructure, for housing, for any number of other things, while also in there saying, okay, these are kind of the goals, and you probably will see more buzzwords, as you call them, in the goals, and our strategies is where we try to make sure we're very context sensitive to our region and our area of where different things are appropriate to do and whether not. So that is something that we're doing within the plan ourselves. So I get what you all are saying, and that's always a balance for us is how do we balance all of these other needs, and that's what our staff are trying to do within that.
And I will agree, Sean, you need the buzzwords because the people above us that have the money understand those buzzwords.
That's their
Even though they might not apply to us, they understand them. So, okay.
We get it. I mean, if you can push back as much as you can push back to let them know that we really are more of a rural area, even though.
Yep, doing that all the time.
Shasta Lake City to Anderson is really kind of one area. When you really get right down to it, but we're still kind of a rural.
Definitely.
Yep.
It's interesting how we straddle that at the state because we can participate in CALCOG and other, like where BART or, into the large San Francisco, LA are there and they're guiding those conversations. But we are sitting there on straddling where we're trying to also meet with the rurals and the North State super region and be a guiding, help them as well. So it's an interesting place that we sit.
Okay, if we're done with.
Let's go next slide.
Sorry, I thought you were done. My apologies.
Next slide, please, Michael. Make sure I'm not missing anything.
Might have dozed off.
Yep, he's gone.
That's pretty.
Very nice.
Yeah, I think that this was an update for you. I wanted to make certain any members of the public knew how they could provide comments to me. And we are accepting comments now, and we will continue to through the June board meeting.
Thank
So
you, Jennifer.
I would like to get on Stan's soapbox just for a second on buzzwords. And of course, if we're trying to get Sacramento to fund it, we have the word climate change and they're all into that. But I think more effective and more accurate wording on how we support public safety is if we said that we're going to strive to mitigate and adapt the impacts of climate change. We ought to say the impacts with historic extreme weather, because we go to 1862, 1941, 1964, 1974, those floods, and that is so much more than anything that we saw on all the climate change, that they are really what we ought to be providing for safety.
Yeah, I would agree with Greg on that.
I think that's under the how we plan.
It's the last one, yeah. RTP goals and how we plan to.
Yeah, it's under the how we plan, so it's not actually, you know, a goal that's adopted.
If you can't just replace it with climate change, leave climate change and add and historic extreme weather.
Okay, and he does say extreme weather, I'll add,
I know, but not historic, because what we have historic is so much more than what you could even dream would happen.
Well, was it 1862 was.
1862 was Sacramento.
Sacramento and the San Joaquin Valley completely flooded. The
But-
only thing that was sticking out was the Sutter Buttes.
The river boats, the paddle wheels were going 16 miles sideways,
Yeah,
and the telegraph poles 40 foot were underwater.
everything, yeah.
So you can't, you just, 1862 is the historic event.
And it was something like 10 times what Shasta Dam would have been able to hold if Shasta Dam had been
Right.
empty. It was an enormous amount of water, so.
Yeah, well, but look at 1964 on the Klamath River. I mean, that is just,
Yeah.
And we'll take all these comments and we'll include that in part of the draft plan and everything, so.
okay, well, thank you.
Yes.
Flood, we're living in California, but
Yeah.
I remember at 55, the flood.
this was an update, no action.
Yuba City, Marysville.
But we do have to allow for public comment.
County, and he's had to evacuate our house because
Okay.
It is a core.
Open.
we're out in the country.
All right, that was the informational. We are going to move on to
That
item
was probably one of my first memories.
16. Michael?
Hello there. Let me just get my presentation software up here and running. Okay,
Informational on State Route 273.
yes. Okay. Get the share going.
Nice tie, by the way, Michael. I like your tie.
Thank you. Can you see this okay?
Eyes.
Yep.
Great. Good afternoon, Chair Mazzano and members of the board. I'm here today to give a presentation to familiarize the board with the SR 273, State Route 273 Multimodal Corridor Plan, why the effort exists, past board actions that have brought us to this point, and how the planning effort will proceed moving forward. The route, now known as State Route 273, is one of the oldest human traveled corridors in the region, inarguably the most complex, and it probably ranks only behind Interstate 5 and the railroad in overall significance. Parts of the corridor were in use during the California Gold Rush, connecting the booming town of Shasta to Red Bluff and points south, and the settlers had likely adopted and adapted pre-existing indigenous trails for much of its route. Once the town of Redding was established, much of the alignment still in use today was put in place, and it was simply called the Redding-Anderson Road. The route, now known as State Route 273, has been part of the California highway system for over 100 years now. First known simply as the Pacific Highway, then Highway 99, and now State Route 273. This photo illustrates a time when the speed limit was 20 miles per hour in closely built up or residential districts, and even less at intersections. Widespread adoption of the automobile had an enormous impact on development patterns. This 1923 photo shows the existing alignment in place running diagonally, and the South Market Street area entirely agricultural and the surrounding area entirely rural.
What was the date?
This is dated 1923. In the past 100 years, adjacent land use and development patterns have changed considerably, even if the route's alignment has not. In fact, much of the route's design is largely unchanged from the 1950s, the days before Interstate 5 and when Cypress Avenue served as Highway 44. These are all major factors into how we got to where we are today. This is a heat map showing the location of collisions on 273 from 2011 through 2020. In that period, there were 587 recorded crashes, resulting in 42 people killed and 68 seriously injured. Over a third of these crashes were due to unsafe speeds. And more than 1 out of 8 of all crash fatalities in the Shasta region, that's Shasta County, occurred on 273 during that period.
Going to Anderson.
And nearly a third of all crash fatalities involving someone walking or biking in the entire Shasta region occurred on 273 in that period. Eventually, everyone has come to recognize something must be done. But what? Recognizing the corridor's complexity and size, Caltrans and District 2 divided the corridor into two segments at Rancho Road and applied for separate grants to fund the respective sections. The thought was to combine the funds if both applications were successful, and one of us would at least be able to address some of the corridor if only one application were successful. Luckily, both grants were funded. So the SRTA board accepted the grant and directed staff to begin consultant procurement. Caltrans headquarters and District 2 began work on determining the best way administratively to combine the funds, and ultimately they determined that a joint powers agreement, or JPA, was necessary. The SRTA board of directors authorized the executive director to enter into the JPA and also authorized him to execute a technical services agreement for consultant services once the JPA was finalized. It took longer to finalize language in the JPA than expected. We were a little frustrated, but it may be a blessing in disguise, as Caltrans has recently updated guidance during this period that will be extremely helpful in this effort. So once we received the notice to proceed, we quickly executed the technical services agreement with GHD and began work. The funds currently expire next year, but we have begun work on the extension. We did not want to accidentally restart the JPA approval process by requesting an extension before the original JPA was approved. So I am proud at long last to say work began last month on the State Route 273 multimodal corridor plan. We're in the process of finalizing the project advisory committee. These are the jurisdictions and departments that will form the core group guiding and informing the overall effort and will be most involved with the process. And so you can see that on the screen. We have representatives from the City of Anderson, City of Reading Public Works, Planning and Parks Department, because they all have different perspectives and priorities. RABA, Shasta County Department of Public Works and Planning Department, and Healthy Shasta. And we've also extended invitations to Reading Rancheria and Union Pacific Railroad, and we're very much hoping to hear back. So public engagement is going to be a huge part of this effort, and we have some major public engagement events coming up. The first two open house events are to help identify issues, challenges, and locations that should be addressed, to identify ways that people currently use the corridor, to identify ways that people would like to use the corridor, and to identify any corridors within a corridor that may exist. And by that, we just mean, you know, some people may only use a certain segment of the corridor. And so what's appropriate for one segment may not be appropriate for another. So we're going to try and figure out what those are. Then we're going to have a public visioning event. And basically, this is to promote blue sky thinking about the effort. And by blue sky, I mean unconstrained thinking. Between this planning effort and a historic investment in infrastructure, we really have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity here to design the corridor for the next 100 years. And there's no reason it necessarily has to look the same way as it does now. The goal of this event will be to expand the realm of what's considered possible in our communities, because so often we limit ourselves out of the gate. But by July, the PAC will have agreed to a corridor goal and planning document. And basically that's going to inform the methods we use going forward, the measures, the metrics, that sort of thing. We're trying to go into this process with as few preconceived notions as possible, but we expect there will be two areas of interest: safety and resiliency. So I want to talk a little bit about the technical planning work and how this will happen. And so basically, once we've received the first round of public engagement and agreed to the goals document, our first step will be to look at the corridor and figure out how it's currently working. How is it working for motorists? How is it working for freight, for rail, for transit, for people walking and biking? We want to know what works well, what doesn't, what can future conditions be expected to look like on our current trajectory. Then we're going to propose projects and strategies to get us from where we are to where we want to be. And then we group these proposed projects and strategies into scenarios and evaluate them. Are these likely to get us to where we want to be? Are there particular combinations that work better than others? And in prior planning efforts and other venues, there's been considerable interest in a couple of ideas that for various reasons we haven't been able to look at. And we're really looking at this as a once in a lifetime opportunity and want to leave no stone unturned. So the scope of work for this effort includes feasibility studies to examine a partial or full reversion of one-way streets back to two-way streets in downtown Reading, a roundabout at the Cypress intersection, and 2 to 4 additional feasibility studies that we anticipate will be identified as part of the planning process. And then finally, we'll examine and evaluate the gateway approaches to 273 in downtown Reading, especially in light of one or more of the scenarios I just discussed. So as part of that effort, we'll be looking at 299 in Placer out to Buenaventura, that seemed a logical cutoff, and 44 in Cypress out to I-5, same thing for that. We will be coming back to the board of directors several times in this process. We anticipate in June of this year, we'll provide a summary and an update of public engagement thus far. We may have the current performance assessment prepared at that time, and we'll solicit additional board input. Then we'll come back again in early 2024, and we'll summarize our work to date, including potential projects that are identified as part of this process, the findings from the feasibility studies, and solicit additional board input. And near the end of the planning process, we'll have another big round of public engagement. We're going to share our findings from the previous outreach with the public, share our draft recommendations, and try to facilitate community consensus. And then we take it all and we begin work on our major final deliverables. And I should emphasize that this schedule's tentative, but we aim to take the draft report to the board of directors in October of next year. Get your comments and feedback, any revisions that are necessary, and then bring it back to you in February after that. The final report will include a conceptual drawings and designs and a prioritized list of projects by different planning horizons, short-term, medium-term, long-term. We anticipate that some of these improvements may be able to be programmed through the State Highway Operations and Protection Program, also known as SHOP. And others may require capital grant funding through Highway Safety Improvement Program, HSIP, the Active Transportation Program, ATP, and others. And that concludes my presentation. Did anybody have any questions?
Questions. First, what's a rough idea of what that might cost?
What's that? The study or?
No, the project itself, the construction of what, I mean, I know you don't know what it looks like yet, but it looks like a lot.
Well, that's what in terms of the plan is going to come up with various proposed improvements. And as part of that, they'll deliver a rough budget for that. But we don't know what those improvements are going to be at this point, because we're trying to go into it with as few preconceived notions. As far as those 1 or 2 things that we discussed, like the one-way to two-way reversion and the traffic circle roundabout, any sort of cost, the cost associated with that, obviously there's a cost, will be identified as part of the feasibility study.
And can you put that slide up that shows the deaths?
Yeah.
The heat map?
Yeah.
I think the heat map one, Michael?
Yep, working on it. This one?
The heat map was accidents.
Well,
There's 42
crashes.
people killed there.
Are these vehicles crashes or pedestrian? What are they exactly?
The heat map shows all crashes. And so the darker color shows where areas where the crashes are more frequent. So we're seeing intersections in a lot of these areas.
But you're not differentiating between pedestrian and or vehicle collision.
Not on the heat
You're
map.
just telling me that 42 people got killed. What we don't know is if they got killed crossing the street or if they got killed in a traffic accident.
Well, either one is traffic collision.
Granted. Having worked that road for 10 years with the highway patrol, I've worked my fair share of fatal collisions out there. And I think if you were to research it, you'd find out that most of them were auto-ped. Somebody crossing that highway and getting knocked
yes,
off.
most of the deaths occurring in the Shasta region of people walking and biking are occurring on 273.
Yeah. So
and I've broken down all of the statistics from the source listed on this slide, the transportation injury mapping system, and I've sliced and diced it every way you can imagine. And I could get the figures for you if you're interested.
You're right, you're spot on. I mean, it's the third.
Yeah, and I would go a little further. I would like to know of those deaths, who are those people exactly would probably be of interest. And you could put it into demographics of pay scale or something to give us an idea what group of people died.
So there's
So in terms of social demographics, that is going to depend on what actual information is in the reports that are provided. So some of that may be hard, other than to identify gender or certain things, some other things may be impossible for us to know.
I'm willing to bet you lunch. If you do that, you're going to find out that the majority of them are transients.
Which is what my question was. I think that would be helpful to, if you're going to do considerable amount of changes to address who the people are. And is that what is spurred the multi-model plan is the deaths? Is that what I understand? Is that the ultimate reason why we're making changes?
Well, multimodal is a state requirement. So being able to do, when you start looking at any type of improvements right now, so it doesn't matter if it's Caltrans or if it's Reading, in everything, whoever owns facilities, complete streets and multimodal facilities is a part of anything that we have to do now and part of what we look at for improvements. Some of them can be specific to ADA accessibility, and so like, for instance, Caltrans is doing the project where they've got sidewalks that they're adding on a section of 273, where they've cut away a hill to minimize the impact of pedestrians in an area, regardless of who they are, going out into the lanes or too close to lanes of traffic, and by eliminating those barriers. So that is one of the things they're doing. But, complete streets and multimodal is a part of everyday planning now for projects on our highway, on our streets and roads.
Okay.
Michael, great presentation. I have two comments for you. One, in some of the earlier photos
yes,
that you put up there, I really believe I saw some parking meters. Okay.
first parking meter came to Reading in 1947. I'm a history buff.
And you piqued my interest when you talked about turning one-way streets to two-way streets in downtown Reading.
A lot of people have been talking about that, in my experience, going back to at least the 90s. And actually, I remember merchants were kind of displeased. I found articles, merchants were kind of displeased that they ever went one way back when it happened in the 50s.
Well, I'll be talking to my good friend, Mr. Chuck Auckland, about that at a later date.
Nothing set in stone, it's just talk.
And that's Caltrans, yes. Great presentation, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? Is there any public comment on this, Amy? Or Michael?
I don't have any.
I don't have any.
Okay.
Thank you.
Move on to item.
Hey, hold on. Michael? I think
Yes,
this is
sir.
one of the best presentations we've had here recently.
Oh,
I want
thank
to
you.
commend you for that. And I would also like to have a thumb drive of that presentation. I would like to show part of this at our next city council meeting.
Happy to do it.
I like the thumb drive as well or something with it. Thank you.
Okay, I'll see what I can do.
Is that because that one photo, 19,
I like the horse, with the four of the horses.
I thought you were going to say that 1927 truck in there was your first truck.
Okay, folks, item 17 is suggestions by the board for relative potential topics at future board of directors meetings. Anybody?
Yes. Actually, I have a pleasure writing today.
Yeah.
We'll pass this over to the chairman. Here's some of the things that Mike and Jeff asked me to bring today. We need to find more funds for local streets and roads, less funds for consultants and bike lanes. Again, that's a rural perspective. We have lots of needs and answers for basic curb and gutters, and I see that need throughout the county. So local road funds. I can go anywhere in the county and I can find some place where we need more basic curb and gutters. I really, again, don't see a lot of demand for mass transit and zero emission vehicles in Shasta County. I realize RABA is what RABA is. So we deal with it. And that really should say more SRTA meetings throughout the year. Mike Gallagher really enjoys this board and he thinks we need to meet more than we do. So make that SRTA instead of RABA. And then, maybe this 273 will be a 3-lane project. And I think there should be more funds for rural roads. Again, this is kind of our perspective in and around Anderson is that, the feeder roads coming into Anderson might need upgrades. I can think of several, Gas Point Road and out of Cottonwood, and then we have Olinda Road and Happy Valley Road out of Anderson are both areas that probably could stand some upgrades. Gas Point Road in particular is very impacted.
So on that, I think in terms of what this tells me at least is one in which is something we've had now that the federal transportation bill was passed and other things is working on updates of our funding fact sheets and having a series of workshops. It's been a few years since the last time we've had a set of workshops about the different fund sources we have available to the region, both by formula and then also from competitive grants. So that is something we're working on is updating our fact sheets. And then it's probably something that we can look at a strategy of maybe short workshop sessions where we can talk about a set of different funding opportunities that are available. I would say on a lot of this, we are working with our partners in Caltrans to find any funding available that we can and everything. Some of the things are just going to be, it's going to depend on what the fund sources allow us, what are the eligible types of projects and the capacity for staff between SRTA and the agencies to go for those. That's always a challenge as well. But I think that's at least as point to one thing that has been on my radar to work on getting is some funding workshops for discussion with the board through some meetings. So we can look to identify when might be the best times to do those little, 15-minute sessions over a couple of board meetings or something.
So this, at least you have our feedback, and I really did enjoy the 273 presentation, and we're looking forward to providing input on that at the open house. Apparently there's going to be one in Anderson late March, so.
Yeah, there'll be a few in that project.
We would really look forward to participating in that. I know you guys have a tough job here in a lot of respects, because in order to get funding, you have to go through all of the buzzwords from the feds and buzzwords from the state, and the state's probably far worse than the feds. So, just continue to do your best and push back where you can and like rural to the best of your ability.
Sean, for the next meeting, when I first got on this board, we had a list of the grants that SRTA was managing. And I was blown away by the dollar amount. Bring that back so we can have a history lesson.
And wouldn't you say, Sean, specifically thinking regional, for a small town like Anderson, has received a huge amount of money through the efforts of SRTA, through roundabouts and the 3 lanes and the.
I get that.
Right,
I get that.
And for a town that size, the amount of money that's been spent there already is probably greater than any other area, I would imagine.
That'd be something I'd have to see exactly how we do that. Different.
Raising that bridge over the railroad track was $100 million project.
Yeah, we can thank the railroad for having to force us to do a whole bunch of work on that one too.
I heard the construction every day for 3 years. I understand.
Okay, folks, before I do the final thing here, I want to thank the staff for riding it out here today. We appreciate what you do on behalf of the board. Terrific job that you do for us here, and certainly Shasta County. Keep doing what you're doing, and we look forward to your presentations when you're able to get up in front of us. Give this young lady a break once in a while. To our
Jennifer.
esteemed colleagues from Reading there, Steve and Chuck, thanks for hanging out with us. And Tim, you're filling in today, is that what I'm hearing?
You bet.
Well, thanks for filling in.
We got a couple guys in Sacramento today.
Okay, all right, and
I only have one thing, board members Mazzano, Jones, and Watkins, I need you to stay to sign some documents before you leave. So that way it reduces how many people Amy needs to get a hold of.
with that, we will adjourn.
Thank you.
Have fun, Tanessa.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank